Mr. Stroh, why don't you go ahead and kick this in gear, our new president?
Okay. So I threw out a bunch of info on the list. No need to rehash it unless anybody has questions.
In chat? Where did you put it?
No, it was on the mailing list this morning.
Oh, I have to go
It was
look.
just kind of an agenda.
So here's the thing on that. Well, okay, it's not us. We'll have people who watch this meeting that aren't on that list once it's on YouTube.
Okay, fair enough.
So whatever you think you want to do.
Well, it's so totally of local interest, but if you're not tuned into what's going on with WECG, Whatcom Emergency Communications Group, they are losing their building on the corner of Smith and Northwest. And related to us, that means that the Hamwan node, the Arden node, and the WinLink node that are located there are all going to go away. Not immediately. We're not being evicted until sometime early next year at the earliest. It's the building is no longer available to us as of May 1st, 2024. Just something to know about and be aware of. Let's see. So let me share my screen for a second. So this is a group out of North Carolina called TARPN, and they are on a quest for cheap, good data radios. And this particular Yaesu, the 3100, I think it is a $149 2-meter radio, 65 watts. And it's got all the appropriate points to do 9600. And they provide a pretty good set of instructions, and a few people have done this mod, and apparently it's pretty sound as long as you've got a good hand with the soldering, and you're very, very careful when you drill through a hole through the back plate not to let the chips go into the radio. Very important detail. So that was interesting. So there's options out there for light modifications if you want and then of course the Yaesu FTM 6000R that we talked about, that's $300 and it's already got the data jack on it. But so let's see what else. Rob, you want to talk about your activity with Google Groups and old list and the website?
Okay. Yeah, right now I'm working on putting up the new website. I've got it on my test server. It's actually, you can get to it live, but there's nothing really there. I don't really have I haven't found the right template, or I haven't built the right template for it, so it looks really plain. But just recently I asked Steve if I could have access to download the backups of the old Google groups. Yes, I was going to say Yahoo, but wrong one. Yeah, the old Google groups. So I downloaded a backup of all the forms there. I'm going to try to import that into the new system and probably have like bbPress or some kind of forum built into the website. And I'd like to import that either into that form or at least have that accessible on the website so you can peruse through it just as an archive, and just if you have any questions or you say, hey, I remember talking about this one subject, then you can actually go in there and look it up. And that's my plans for that. And the backup is in an MBARC format. And I know there's a few tools out there that can transfer that over to a different system, but I might have to import it into Thunderbird first and then export it back out. I don't know, LDAP, or I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that, but I'll figure it out. So that's one thing. And then the other is that I'm still going to need a lot of input from everyone about topics and subjects and links that you want me to put on the website. I want this to be, like I've mentioned before, pretty much all inclusive. Ignore the dogs in the background. Yes, I know. And yeah, I want it to have as much information as possible for everybody, not just digital, but the whole club itself. And definitely have, a place for people to go that if they need to find out, when the next testing sessions are, or whatever's going on, amateur radio wise, electronics wise, tinkering, whatever. I'd like to have a lot of that stuff. I mean, everything primarily initially is going to be just amateur radio focused. And then I want to expand out from there. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. If that's good, bad, ugly, too much. I don't know. I'd love input from anybody. I've got input from a few of you, and I appreciate that. And the more the merrier. So
to be clear, just to make sure, to be clear, Rob's intent, as I understand it, is to download this and display it purely as an archive. We're not trying to import it into the current groups.io. And this is the reason we kept the Google Groups alive, is that we wanted to do this eventually. And thank you, Rob, for stepping up to do this. And it's needed because Google has a way of killing projects that it loses interest in. Like, I'm sure Google Groups is going to fall by the wayside one of these years. It hasn't gotten any real attention from Google, not like Gmail or some of the other high-profile products. So I fully expect to, have an announcement out of the blue that, in 2 months they're going to sunset Google Groups, and goodbye, good luck, just like Yahoo did. So
yeah, and once they do that, they usually give you a fair amount of warning. Usually, about 2 to 6 months to get your stuff before they just delete it and it's gone. Yep. The old saying, it's like, once it's on the web, it's always on the web. No, not with Google. Yep. They get rid of that stuff. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get a backup of that. And I don't know if I don't think I gave you a copy of that backup, Steve, but I will.
Okay.
I'll compress it down really small, as small as possible. I think it's like 150 megs compressed, ultra compressed. So
okay, sounds good.
It's not that big. It's all
at
text,
a minimum. So. Yeah, at a minimum, you can do keyword searches, just on the text. So, thank you, Rob. Let's see.
I'm ready.
Okay, go for it.
So yeah, so last week, late last week, I was scrubbing junk out of my email and throwing stuff out, and I spotted one of these unsolicited, you get them all the time, emails from Amazon where they wanted to show me something that they thought I might be interested in. And lo and behold, it was something I was very interested in. And so I'll share my screen here. And it's a meter that that will take anywhere from 6.5, 6.5, up to 100 volts. I'm assuming they have some sort of a 5-volt voltage regulator in there that requires a little more than 5 volts to run the electronics, whatever, and clear up to 100 amps on this display. And you can see there that it measures the voltage and the current, and it tells you, how much power you're using. And also it keeps track of how many watt hours you've been draining your battery or whatever. There's a button over there where you can reset these values. You can set alarms for high voltage and low voltage, and it uses this shunt. I was going to talk a little bit about shunts because they're kind of an interesting thing. If I go back to my camera, anyway, I've got it hooked up to a bench power supply here, and if my wires will let me get close enough, you can see it. If you can see it, they're there. I can turn the knob and change the voltage, and you should see those numbers change. So I'm going to mount this in my GoKit to show me what's going on with my power. Now, a lot of devices come with meters and stuff like that already on them, but this will actually measure everything that's going on in that box. This is the shunt, just to give you an idea of the size. And what this is a very accurate resistor. And it's so accurate and such a low value that you will see in there, if I get by my shirt there, there's a notch in that bar. And they actually cut this notch in order to, for want of a better word, tune the shunt to a very specific value of resistance. And
the word you're looking for is calibrate.
Calibrate that. Well, no, calibrate is the opposite. With a calibrate, you're taking your equipment and making it accurately read the device you have. This is the device, and we want it, but calibrate may still be the right word. I don't know, Steve, but it's kind of, we're not trying to figure out what this resistance is. We're trying to make this resistance something very specific. And so then you hook this in series with the ground on your, so say you have a battery or whatever your power input is, ground goes through this device. And then there's two leads that attach here, and they measure the voltage drop across this resistor. And it's just Ohm's law. So if you know what the voltage is, which you can measure easily, and you know what the voltage, well, you know what the voltage drop here is, and you know what the resistance is, that's two of the legs of Ohm's law. You can accurately figure out what the current is. And so that's how that works. So we'll be putting that in the GoKit and playing around with it and use it as a display, see what's going on. But I like the idea that I can set a high voltage and a low voltage alarm so it can warn me that my voltage is starting to drop and I need to do something about charging my battery. So anyway, so it's around 20 bucks, and it's a nice size and it'll be easy to mount. And I'm looking forward to experimenting with it.
Does it work backwards when you're charging? Does it reset the watt hours used?
I don't think so. If you were, you could have another one that was doing that was coming from your charger to the battery.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a different circuit. This only does, it would do either, but not both. That's my guess. My guess. Now I have I just got one of these lithium ion battery packs from EcoFlow is the device, and it does all that metering for you, and it shows you, it actually uses a phone app that allows you to see what your battery is doing. You can hook it up to solar panels, and there's an app that you put on your phone that talks to the battery pack with Bluetooth, and it'll show you what's going in and what's going out simultaneously on your phone. And that works. It's kind of cool. It works pretty good. It is the Delta not the Delta Pro, but the Delta 2. That guy. So that's going to be the power supply for the GoKit, and it'll run the radios and stuff like that. And it puts out 1,000 watt hours, kilowatt of power on a full charge, on a single charge.
Does that one have the MPPT input for solar panel?
Yes.
Cool.
And they had a screaming deal on this thing when I found it. They were throwing in for free a 100 watt solar panel that plugs right in, and it's a standard connector for the solar panels. And so I ordered it, and then there was a delay in me getting it because I had it shipped for various reasons. I had it shipped to my daughter's house in Portland, and then they brought it up when they came up here for their week vacation with me. And now the pack is $200 cheaper than it was when I bought it. And I thought, well, they're probably not including that panel, but they are. So it's even a better deal. But it is, it's like $7.99 now. So that's it for me.
Okay. Few of you might know, I know Steve knows about 44net, which is the amateur radio IP for V4 address allocation at 44.x.x.x. And ARDC, the parent organization of 44net, had their community biannual, I guess now it is, community meeting on Saturday. And the group that is managing 44net, called their Technical Advisory Committee, is soliciting volunteers for beta testing a new portal and various options. One of the things that I hope they will be doing is to support ARDN tunnel servers. And that's getting a lot of attention, especially there's now several presentations out there on YouTube that are talking about how great it is to be able to do ARDN tunneling via Starlink satellite terminals, as long as you have something in the middle that you can connect out from a Starlink terminal to.
You
so
can't connect in.
Right, you cannot connect in. No way. No, well, the business, you have to have the business version if you want to connect in, which is considerably more expensive. Anyway, they are looking for volunteers, and the way if you are savvy enough to want to be part of this, and I do not count myself as savvy enough to really comment on the networking things. I'm more of a average user on this sort of thing. Send an email to contact, CONTACT, at ARDC.net, and say something like you want to be a 44net volunteer. And again, this info was on my email this morning on the mailing list. And I hope that will help accelerate the acceptance of ARDN mesh networking. I think that would be a really cool thing. My idea about what they ought to be doing is that they basically set up VPN servers that are freely available for amateur radio operators and for amateur radio use, including these ARDN tunnel servers. So if you have a project that you want to tie various amateur radio things together, such as a club station that's out there, in a nice quiet RF spot, and it's uplinked via Starlink satellite for club use, shared club use, this would, ARDC's resources would be very, very welcome. And let's see. And I guess, oh, and then I have my presentation for Zero Retries. Just a moment here.
Yeah, I signed up on that site this morning after I got your message, and I looked and read a lot more about it. But I noticed that Randy and Steve, that's here tonight, are both listed as coordinators on there, at least IP coordinators.
Mm-hmm. Let's see where to go.
I'm muted and I'm trying to talk. You before you move on, you were talking about Starlink, and during our Zoom session during the Tuesday net this morning, the Starlink came up as a topic, and in a way, now that this Elon Musk has created this network with these satellites, it almost makes anything that we're doing with emergency communications, especially the digital stuff that we do, obsolete. Because you can, so you did one, Steve. It's so easy to set up a Starlink station and get it up and running in less than a half hour and have all the internet connectivity that you would ever need in a so like if you're in an emergency situation, you needed to set up a remote base or something like that. It might be the thing that people go to. And our buddy Dave, who lives down in Denton, Texas, was telling us, he joins us every Tuesday morning. It was telling us that he has a friend that has a huge ranch down in Texas, and she wanted to get fiber cable brought into her ranch. And it was going to cost upwards of $24,000 to get the cable in. And so she said, no way, I'm not doing that. And spent a few $100s on a Starlink unit and absolutely loves it. And has all of streaming and all the internet connectivity that she needs. So it's probably going to change what we do. But I was interested in what you were saying about using it as for tunnels with Arden.
I was going to say this to the end, but since Bud queued it up, I still haven't had time to put this presentation together, but during field day, I knew I wasn't going to be able to participate. Just too many things going on, but I did have a few hours. And I literally woke up in the morning of field day, Saturday morning, with this idea kind of fully formed in my head. And so I've been playing around with Starlink, and I hadn't quite pulled the trigger on deciding to keep it because it is $120 a month. But I had turned on payments on my optional payments on my newsletter, and I got enough commitments that it was worth doing. So now that's going to be my connectivity for my shop that I call NHE&J Labs. And so I just got a bit of a bug up my butt and hauled out a portable table, my version of what the power system that Bud just showed, and my Starlink terminal and a laptop. And I went out into literally the middle of my yard, just plopped the Starlink terminal down in an open, about 30 feet from me, plugged everything together, turned it on, and boom, it worked. And I was, and I also have a 100-watt solar panel. And so it wasn't full, the battery unit was not fully charged, and it was pulling a little bit more than I had expected, and it was a semi-cloudy day for me in my location. But it was totally practical to just set that Starlink terminal up, and with a bit of a bigger battery or a bit more solar panels, I could have just kept going indefinitely. And I was getting, and I took a few snapshots. I was easily getting 70 megabits down, and I think it was 10, 12 megabits up. And I did a bunch of contacts I did a bunch of video conferencing in a bunch of different ways. I pinged Bud on Zoom. I pinged some buddies on Messenger and pinged my daughter on iMessage, and just I used a bunch of different systems, and it demonstrated to me that this is here now. I mean, this is emergency communications.
Yeah,
It didn't.
we had Starlink set up out at Everson at our field day thing out there, and it seemed pretty simple and easy to set up. Yeah, just a little square gizmo out in the yard or out in the field there.
Yeah, what makes it amazing is that there's no aiming. It just figures it's got its own GPS receiver built into the dish, and it figures out where it is. It listens passively for a few minutes to listen to the transmissions from the satellites it does find, and then it aims itself and rotates itself, and then it passively, or not passively, it actively tracks the satellites even without moving the actual dish, because it's a phased array antenna. So that sucker just works, and yeah, it's expensive at the moment, but darn, I mean, it works anywhere you can see the sky.
The sheriff's department's van at field day had Starlink also.
So there was the
That's what I was talking about, was that one.
Well, there was also one, I think it was the red van there Kevin was associated with. They had one sitting out in the field there on our side too.
Oh, that's the one I saw. I didn't notice that the sheriff had one too.
Yeah, they had it on the over there behind there on the other side of their van.
Oh, okay, I missed that.
So I remember Randy showing me the Ferndale ACS MCOM vehicle, and he was telling me about how they had turned off the satellite service because it was expensive, and I think the equipment had aged out and they had to replace it or something like that. It just wasn't usable anymore. And just these consumer Starlink terminals can literally be put on top of a vehicle and bolted down. They don't have to be free to move. They don't perform quite as well if they can't optimize their position, but facing flat up, and there are frames now that you can buy to mount these things on top of vehicles. They work fine. That, again, you don't get quite as much speed because you can't optimize it, but they work fine because of that phased array electronic tracking. And that's what an awful lot of people are doing now. They're putting them on, tops of semi trucks, tops of campers, etc. So Starlink is a thing, and if you want communications anywhere you can see the sky, it is the way to go.
One of their big advertisement is for RVers.
Yeah, a lot of RVers. Yeah, and it's so popular, ironically, in the Bay Area, because the Bay Area has really crappy broadband up in the hills. They've never gotten the cable systems or fiber or anything, and they're stuck with DSL and crappy cell service. So Starlink is oversubscribed in the Bay Area. You can't turn on new service unless you're willing to pay the business rates. There's just too much saturation. Let's see. So
yeah, initially oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The Starlink was, I noticed a lot of the advertisements initially was for like travelers, RVers, whatever, but essentially you couldn't, run it while you were traveling. But as you said, there's so many hacks out there for flat mounting it. You don't even have to like cut it apart anymore, because initially you had to cut the whole back off, and hopefully you didn't cut into anything important. Now I think there's other mods that you don't even have to do a whole lot of cutting to get rid of the tracking motor and the mount, because that would be kind of.
Yeah, the frames that I've seen are big enough to accommodate the depth of the whole dish, and you just dismount it, and in the app now it lets you turn off the motor, so you're not even burning up power to try, for the motor to even try and move.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, and what's really hilarious is if you see some of the cruise ships, they'll have like 10 lined up on each side of the ship. It's killing the geosynchronous satellite broadband business. They just aren't even in the ballgame anymore. So let's see. Oops. Anyway, share screen. There we go. So this is my little bit for zero retries. I did a series over 2 issues about the most interesting stuff I'm seeing right now that I'm trying to track in zero retries, and so they were total. It was my top 10. ARDC is funding various grants for amateur radio projects and other things like scholarships. But that is the biggest step change in amateur radio, because all of a sudden there is money available to do really interesting things and one of the biggest changes that ARDC makes possible is that they have no problem if you spend money on professional labor, as long as the grant went to a not-for-profit group. For example, if Ferndale ACS wanted to put up a repeater, ARDC would happily pay for the professional labor involved in putting up the repeater, because you can't, very few repeaters will allow you to get up on the tower anymore. You have to pay for that kind of work, as well as all of the real expenses like hard line and the repeater box itself, the antennas, etc. Second one was ARDN mesh, which everybody in this group is probably familiar with. New packet radio has been a sleeper. This has been around for 4 years now, and this is a system that was developed by an amateur in France for amateur radio, and it's basically a TCP/IP system that can do up to half a megabit per second. It uses a 100 kilohertz channel on 440, and that you can use 100 kilohertz channels on 220 and up. And but the one irritating thing in the U.S. anyway is that we have this inane limitation that you cannot use a data system, at least on UHF. As soon as you get to 1240 to 1300, you can't, and 900 and 1240, you can use a faster than 56 kilosymbols per second. So the new packet radio guy said, "Oh, you want it to go slower? Okay." So he retarded the data rate down to, I think it was around 60 kilobits per second, but natively it does half a megabit per second, and it uses, even the slower version uses the same 100 kilohertz channel. So it's, anyway, new packet radio is definitely something that if you want to experiment with data over amateur radio, that's something you ought to take a good look at. RPX 100 is a project that's underway. I think it's still underway. The website went dark. By the Austrian Amateur Radio Society, and it was a marriage of a software-defined radio module called the Lime SDR. That's the one they chose. But the big thing was that they built the rest of the radio, meaning that a Lime SDR and all these other software-defined transceivers only put out a few milliwatts, which is not enough power to really do anything. It's good for lab work, but that's about it. So the RPX 100 created a wrapper, a driver amp, and then a power amp and it's combined 6 meters, 2 meters, and 440. And I hope that actually comes to fruition and they publish the results so it can be, I hope, cloned by some cheap Chinese vendor. Anyway, so if we're seeing that that modest start, we're going to start seeing in the next few years software-defined transceivers with real power levels that are real software-defined transceivers, not the window dressing that we're seeing from ICOM and Yaesu, et cetera. VARA FM is another fast data system, and the novel thing about VARA FM is that it's software running on Windows. If you have a high resolution audio interface and a radio that has the data jack, it will do up to 25 kilobits per second in a 20 kilohertz FM channel. I'm not aware of anybody who does it, can go anywhere near that speed with packet radio technology. And it has a lot of refinements that just make it amazing. And one of the cool things is that you don't need the data jack or the high resolution of a what was the other audio interface? The USB. Anyway, so just about any data or any audio interface will work, and it even using the microphone and speaker connections on an average radio, you can still do 12 kilobits per second. Still better, better than 9600 and none of the fussiness. So it's getting an awful lot of traction, especially with WinLink. They're taking the same radios, adding a signal link USB, and getting 12 kilobits per second instead of the 1200 bits per second. The second batch, which I published last week, M17 Project is really getting some traction now that they were one of the folks that got a grant from ARDC, and they're starting to spin off some hardware. In fact, they have a nice handheld radio prototype that's really pretty much a software-defined transceiver that you can hold in your hand, including the battery pack, the keyboard, and the display. Now it's still, like I said, milliwatts transmit power, but that can be fixed. They're working out all the details, and M17 is think of it as DMR without the proprietary codec. They're using not free DV. Can't remember the name of the codec, but it's software codec and it's open source, so there's no proprietary stuff, and they're running totally open source, and it's cool to watch them evolve that. I named these three projects Nino TNC, Direwolf software TNC, and a hardware called the TNC4. And what was impressive to me about these three is that they're indicating that packet radio is, going strong still in this day. And including brand new hardware. The Nino TNC it's in 10th revision or something like that between the firmware and the hardware. Kind of like Bud's Project, you can build a TNC from scratch. Unlike Bud's Project, they give you the PCB and the processor, and everything else you have to scavenge up for yourself. The TNC4 is assembled and tested. Very nice unit. Battery pack. Cool thing about the TNC4 is that it will do. It has its own battery, and it will talk via Bluetooth to a Apple iOS device, either an iPad or an iPhone. So you can run software on the iPhone and the iPad and talk back to the TNC via Bluetooth. And it is not easy to get to talk to the Bluetooth in an iOS device. It's fraught with peril. KN9Q Radio. Phil Karn is KN9Q, and the guy is just a bloody genius. And he figured out that you can basically take the IQ output of just about any software-defined radio and start decoding not an infinite number of virtual receivers, but more than enough to monitor every FM, assigned FM channel on 2 meters, 220, 440 simultaneously. Well, you need a radio dedicated to each band, but within that band, you can monitor every channel simultaneously and record it and spit it out. And Phil is a genius that knows TCP/IP. He's actually got a few RFCs to his name, and he uses an approach called multicasting to pull off some of this magic. And doesn't take much of a computer. It runs fine on a Raspberry Pi 4. I talked about a few space projects, one of which was the QO100 satellite in the Eastern Hemisphere. I talked about ARRL. I can't remember what the other one was. Earth, Moon, Earth is getting to be pretty popular now that you can do it with a pretty modest station. And I just discovered that there is a variant of the WSJT-X software for doing Earth, Moon, Earth that's purely a receiver, just to kind of get your feet wet and see what you can do with a pretty modest station. Just receiving the big guns that are hitting, painting the moon with their really powerful signals. And the last one was the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications, which is a project that was, again, funded by ARDC grant. And they have been getting everything they can get their hands on and digitizing it and making it available. They're hitting me up. They said, well, we finished out all 13 or so boxes that you've sent. So what else you got? So it's time to, empty my shop a little bit more of all the paper, amateur radio paper anyway. And this was interesting. ARRL is hiring what they call a digital RF engineer. This is not a joke. This was a real posting that came out a few days ago. And I'll just let you read it and soak it in. This is the same group that hasn't seen fit to acknowledge that there's data communications going on in amateur radio for quite some time. So this is a staff position. It's a full-time, position. There were more bullet points in this. I just cherry picked a few, but if this is the real thing and they actually find somebody to do this, it bodes well. I'm impressed with this. Now, will they listen to this person? Remains to be seen, but it sounds interesting. And I'm especially interested in this first bullet, assist with this one. Planning and implementation of a high-speed wireless data network, for amateur radio. And a lot of people won't remember, but they actually did this second bullet point for quite some time. When the data jacks first started showing up on radios, they actually tested it to see what the bit error rate was and of using this, and the turnaround time and other parameters that were actually germane. And there was I took them to task in my newsletter. They actually reviewed a new radio that had a data jack, and they completely ignored the data jack. So this is for packet use if you're into packet. That's all they said about it. So mesh networking, that pretty much means ARDN. And and then high-speed networking at ARRL HQ and in the field. So I kind of encouraged by this. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So there's the blurb about the zero retries. So. Let's see, yep. Oh, Rob's on it, man. Good job, Rob. So any questions about all that?
So Steve, all those links, they're on your zero retries site then,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, good. That's a great list of resources there. Appreciate it.
While you're posting links, I forgot to put the link up for that meter for the GoKit. So I'll send that at you right now.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't realize all those links that I just put up were on your. I
Well,
didn't get a
they're-
chance to read that one yet.
That's fine. But no, they're in there. They're in the newsletter. I talk about them, but
Okay, awesome.
I didn't tease them out. So you made it easier for the folks.
Yeah, and Rob,
Okay.
when you do that, it makes it way easier for me when I'm doing the description for the video, because they're all there in one place and I can copy and paste them. So we really appreciate that.
Okay, no problem then. Glad I could help. Hopefully, I put the right links in there.
Yeah. Oh, and one last thing that I had on the email that I sent out this morning is if you have, a project that you're working on that you want routable IP addresses, and it's an amateur radio project, you can get free IPv4 addresses assigned to you via ARDC's 44net project. So, and that link is portal, portal.amper.org. And you can just apply right there. And basically you have to have a call sign and they'll vet you.
So,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I did see Steve's name and Randy's name as IP coordinators. I guess there's like a group of 8, or I'm not sure how many IP addresses that you guys are responsible for. I don't know if that's still the case, but I did see you in there as coordinators. I forgot exactly what the term was for it.
I suspect they're actually users because the coordinator is John Hayes, K7VE for Western
Yeah.
Washington.
Well, he's the main, yeah. But I mean, for the different areas and groups, I guess Bellingham, Steve was listed, and I saw Randy in there as well.
When you say Steve, do you mean me or Steve Stroh?
You. Oh, I'm sorry, forgot.
Oh.
I meant you, not Stroh. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that he had deputized you guys.
Well, yeah, some time ago, Bud connected me to him because he was overwhelmed with the work of assigning 44 addresses, and he asked, they were going to carve up the geographical areas so it would, and assign it to other people so he wouldn't have to do the whole thing. And I volunteered, yes, but I haven't heard anything since volunteering. So I actually have not done anything with it. I mean, I have my own allocation from the 44net. I have had for several years now. And they give you an IP tunnel. So you build a tunnel back to their facility. And then whatever allocation they give you out of their 44net is routed to you, to your router. So you have to have a fairly capable router at your house in order to use this 44net. I mean, you can't just have a Comcast router or a, an off-the-shelf Linksys router. It's just not going to work. But if you put OpenWRT on those routers, it would work.
So Steve Stroh, when you and I were back in the days of NAPRA, Northwest Amateur Packet Radio Association, and we were running the Tapper TNCs, we all got 44 dot whatever IP addresses, didn't we? Don't I remember that right?
Correct. Yeah,
One?
it was 44.24
Yeah.
was Western Washington. And then we had, it was probably 12 subnets off of that, 44.24.100, et cetera. And those were assigned to various groups, regional or local groups. There was, for example, one subnet was for one particular 9600 baud repeater. And everybody who was going to work through that repeater got a statically assigned IP address for that repeater, for the port that was going to be on that repeater. And we had multiple, and there were some of us that had multiple ports pointing at different repeaters, and we could be running a gateway. I wrote an article about this for the 1996 DCC that captured the flavor of what we were doing, and it was bleeding edge for the time. So yeah, and this is the same outfit that assigns those same addresses, but our allocations are still, all of the allocations for that group are still in the archives of they're just not in use anymore.
Well, yeah, if I dug around somewhere, I could probably find my IP address, but it was part of, we must have used them just to run an ordinary packet, did we?
No, we were running, well, there were a whole bunch of us that were running TCP/IP. We would run the KN9Q NOS on a PC.
That's right. We used
a DOS PC, if you can believe it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we actually sent email, and that I got my first networking job on the strength of knowing TCP/IP from amateur radio, from that system. So yeah, I was just amazed. So yeah, and Phil Karn, KN9Q, was the original architect of that idea. He got fed up with not being able to, and he was a proponent of doing TCP/IP over amateur radio, and everybody poo-pooed him. Oh, you can't, TCP/IP needs a real network connection, not this packet radio stuff. And Phil said, "Okay, you suckers," and proceeded to sit down and write it. And he did, and it worked well. And it's actually still in use in places because it eventually evolved to JNOS, which was eventually ported to Linux, and JNOS is still in use to this day. There's kind of a funny story about how JNOS came to be, and it's infamous to those of us who lived through it. So there was a very, very bright guy, easily as bright as Phil Karn. Was a grad student down at Portland State University named Johan. Oh, I don't remember Johan's last name. Ronaldo. And he was from Holland, Netherlands. And he wanted to run TCP/IP over packet radio. And he just could not get anybody else interested in the Portland area. So Johan said, "All right, you turds, I'll show you." So Johan sat down and took Phil Karn's NOS code. Phil released it as what we now know as open source. And he added layers to it to be able to tunnel TCP/IP packets through the NetROM network that did exist in Portland. And he tunneled his way through the NetROM network between Portland and Seattle. And he played with us. And, it was slow and it was error prone, but it worked. And Johan was just an amazing thing. And all that stuff is still there in JNOS. And so Johan's call was W Whiskey Golf 7 Juliet. So that's where the J in JNOS came from. So a little bit of local history. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Hearing nothing. Seeing nothing. Going once. Oh, there you go. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I think it was Dave WD there. You had that TYT plug thing that went into the radios for digital. What's the wiring for that?
There are six wires.
Yeah,
you only use 5 of them. The power.
I noticed the orange one didn't get used. Yeah,
actually, the orange one did. The red one is the only one that did not, because it was the power.
Oh, okay.
Everything else was. I can either forward it to you, or it's on several of the other websites that were associated with what we had last week.
Yeah, why don't you forward it to me? Because I missed some of it, and
all right.
I got a couple of those radios, and I figured I might as well get some of those plugs.
Yeah, I just did a lengthy, I won't say quick, lengthy search on that radio and doing digital modes and everything else, and found about 4 or 5 different websites that either videos or schematics or the wiring sets up. And I'll write down what the wiring was that Steve and I kind of went through. Steve kind of helped real quick a lot, telling me which wire goes to what on the plug itself.
Yeah.
And it's worked for us, but apparently, until we get more people there, Steve was saying that he kept hearing me in the background as I was sending to him. So we may have to either work on that or disconnect the mic to do digital.
Yeah, so to add to that, this particular radio, and there are other radios that actually have a built-in plug, like the ICOM 208, where the audio path, when you're using it in 1200 mode, using the 1200 audio tap, is shared by the microphone. So you actually have to unplug the microphone if you're going to use it for digital. And if you're going to use it for voice, unplug your data connection to your computer or to your sound card. You don't have both of them connected at the same time. The DR 1235, let's see, 135, 235, and 435 Alinco radios had the same issue. Those radios had 9600 taps, and if you were using the 9600 tap in and out, then you didn't have this problem. But if you used the 1200 tap, it was shared with the microphone. And so the problem is that if you're running, like in Dave's case, and we haven't confirmed this, but I have a strong hunch that this is what's going on. You're using this new connector on his radio, and he's plugged it into his computer, and he's running FSQ on FL Digi, and he's transmitting. He has the microphone connected. If he's speaking, his voice is also being transmitted, even though he's not touching the microphone. So, and so I was just looking in the ICOM 208 manual, and it explicitly says, make sure you unplug the microphone if you're using this in data mode.
Yeah, I think I've actually ran into that before with something else. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks.
And I just posted the link that you're looking for in the chat room.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So this may not be the best radio to use for what we want it to do. It's not a Kenwood, 71A, obviously, but it fits the bill at least until something else comes up.
Well, I was thinking that we could get something going with 220.
Yeah, and Galen's got his now. We've got to get an antenna up for him, and Randy's in the process. I don't know if he's got his radio yet, but he's got the adapter. So there are several of us that are doing this. We'll see what happens, see if we can get going on it. But I thank you for letting me know about the bike, Steve. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
What frequency are you guys using?
We haven't really even played on it. I think I've got it at 2. I'm currently using the WCG has the last day of the month during your thing, they go simplex. We're using the 220 simplex that they were using for just until we figure a frequency that we want to go on for the digital. So we really haven't even we only got 2 of us that have it right now. We haven't even gone to figure out which frequency we're going to go with yet.
Yeah, 4 years ago, maybe there were 3 of us that I knew of that acquired DR 235 radios from Alinco, and after significant back and forth between myself and Remtronics in California, who's the local service center for Alinco, we finally figured out how to use the 96 audio tap correctly in those radios. And we did have a net going between the 3 of us occasionally on 220 at that time. But then, no one else had 220 radios, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. And then that model was discontinued, and here we are. There is another radio It's sold by BTEC. It doesn't appear to be a Baofeng radio, but it is a Chinese radio, the 50X3, that actually has a data port on it, and supposedly has both a 96 and a 1200 audio. I've not used it. The price for this radio, it's a UHF, VHF, and 220. The 220 is limited to 5 watts, however. And they're selling it for $429, which is really a remarkably high price for one of these Chinese radios. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
And that's kind of why we looked at the TYT. It's
Yep.
$150, and Andy was saying that he can find them for 99 occasionally. I couldn't find it, but for $150, another $15 or $20 for the adapter and an antenna. So everything together, you're under $200.
Mm-hmm.
It was worth the $200 to give it a shot.
Sure.
Now, if I come out with someday up with another, Alinco comes out with another 220 with the 9600 and a port, hey, if we can get it cheap enough, we'll go that way. But until then,
well, Alinco actually did come out with a new 220 radio, but it doesn't have a data port.
exactly. Yeah.
My TYT showed up yesterday. I haven't powered it up yet. And
Okay.
I also have that adapter on order, but it has not shown up. It's
Oh, I thought you
from
said
different
you got it
outfit.
already. All right.
Trust
No,
me,
I
that adapter, that adapter, Mac,
Yeah.
took him 2 weeks to get it. Took me almost 2 weeks. And I, wrote to the company and said, hey, I've been told by another, person that, that you guys have problems getting this out. And they assured me that they didn't, but it still took 2 weeks. So,
If you look up his bio, the RPC Electronics is very much a side hustle for him. And,
Yeah.
he's
well, he did say
he's a
he did
Motorola
say-
engineer.
He did say to me he had just made 40 of them. So he has them in stock. But, it takes quite a while for the post office to get to him, apparently.
Steve Stroh,
You know
do you
what?
know if
Something's different because I ordered mine a few weeks ago and I got it within days. I ordered 2 of them.
do you know if that new Alinco radio, if anyone has a picture or anything else, or if it's like this, TYT that has the plug in there ready?
I have not heard anything about it yet. I don't know that anybody has actually gotten one.
Because I know I looked at that, a lot, and the only kind of connection it has the computer connection, which is a USB-C on the front or
Right.
back. But if it's like the other Alinco, you open up the cover and it's exactly the same as what my TYT is. Everything one for one is the same.
I dived into that a little bit, and there was some weasel wording in there, and I haven't actually gotten in to try to read the manual. There's some kind of ambiguity there about whether it's capable of data modes, but there's definitely no specific connector. Now, it like you said, it does have that USB-C adapter or connection, which they only talk about it being able to be programmed, to be able to dump programming info into it.
Right. But this TYT doesn't have it either, but it's in the radio ready to go.
Yeah.
You just have to open it up and put it in. So if this new one has it there, granted, there may not be a slot already cut for it, but it makes you wonder.
The TYT was a pretty shameless ripoff of the Alinco.
Yes.
And so all they did was they cloned the Alinco internal, the printed circuit board, and decided, oh, nobody uses this port, so let's not include it. But all of the circuit, it was too much trouble to redesign the interface out of the radio, so they just left it alone.
But it'd be interesting if the new Alinco had something already there. It's just they're not marketing it yet because it's inside.
Well, I think that it's interesting that the Yaesu FTM 6000R did come out of the chute. You know, it's a brand new dual band radio from Yaesu, and it's the first one in a while that has not been contaminated with the system fusion stuff. And it had a data port, and I suspect that's because the Yaesu guys were hearing more and more that the WinLink folks wanted to run VARA FM at the high speed, and they really loved that plug and play nature of that data port. So no fabbing up cables, just plug it in with an audio interface. So I suspect that the word's going to get around to the radio manufacturers that people will pay more if it has the plug and play data port.
I was just going to mention that link Bud sent me. That's a good one for ordering the thing, but it's the same thing I've got, and it doesn't show you anything about how to wire it.
I think I've got. What's your email address, Ed?
There are
Ed
there
at
are some instructions out there.
AE7TD.com.
For what it's worth, when Mac first contacted me and said, let's hook up, can you do something? Can you hear me on 220 doing my digital? I grabbed my HT 5T, which is handheld UVR 553. Anyway, it's got 220 on it. So I tuned in to the frequency it was in, and I plugged it into, I happened to, way back when I was trying to get my Baofangs to work with the digital boards and stuff. And I pulled a cable that Remington had built for me and plugged it into the DRX. And I was able to decode his stuff off of the handheld with that adapter, and I was able to send a message to him if I held down the PTT on the radio while I sent the message. I thought that was kind of fun. But so that was my adventure.
And I will send you an email here in a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, great.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Oh,
what about the online and in-person meetings?
Thank you. You, as I recall, Mark, you had set that up to start in September.
Yeah, we can start it in September. We can start it next month if you want, probably. But we have the fire hall up on Church Road available to us. It has complete. You want to do it through MS Teams, or you want to do it through Zoom. It's got a big screen TV with the feed. Somebody can be at home, and when they start talking in speaker view, they can be up on the big screen TV so everybody can see them and be heard. They have multiple microphones to set up around the room so that everybody can be heard in the room for the people on the online side.
I like it.
And we have approval for a trial couple of months at it, see if everybody likes it. If we like it, if they like it, if it works out. So, and we also got it waived so we don't have to pay the fee for the room. So the fire chief in Ferndale thinks that ham radio is good stuff. Because we got his back, we got their back in times of emergency.
Okay.
Which is true.
Ed, check your email. You should have it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I'm thinking
Well-
September for the general meeting. We should have it in person at the fire hall there. if that's still a go at that
Okay.
time.
Okay, let's not hash out the general meeting here on the digital group.
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, come on.
I got it set up for the second Tuesdays and third Tuesdays of every month, so we can go as long as it works.
But that's also something that talk to Steve about, that if you want to start doing the in-person digital, because that would be awesome. I mean, I know some people are still kind of hesitant about that, but
Well, okay, let's just do it for the digital group. Show of hands, how many people would want to show up in person? It's nearly unanimous. Okay.
I wish I
Um,
could, but I better not.
Not interested. I don't want to go to meetings.
So Zoom or Teams would work good there then.
Not Teams.
Not
Teams.
Teams. Yeah. Okay. Zoom.
Yeah.
I
Zoom
even
works
think
great.
I even think
Teams-
they've got one of the other platforms available.
I
The
concur
only thing
with
we have to do
Galen.
is get there.
No teams.
We just have to get like a couple of representatives so that we go there and learn the setups and the teardowns and all the other protocols, so that we can build the team to get there, set it up, and put it away.
So we should stick with Zoom, and let's not confuse people with other options that we're not going to consider.
I agree.
Sorry, what? Zoom? You said Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, sorry,
Stay with
Zoom
Zoom.
instead of other platforms. Got it. Yeah. So, well, let's hash it out over the next couple of weeks and see how many people want to show up at the fire hall. It would be nice to press the flesh, you know. I've flown on planes total of 8 times in the past month past few months, and I'm astonished that I seem to have dodged the bullet. So if I could get away with flying on a plane, I might be able to get away with a in-person meeting. So I'm go for it. Let's see. Oh, I would be going for it if I was going to be in town on the 3rd Tuesday of August, and I don't think I will. So
September.
Yeah.
okay, right, September. So I will I take that back. 3rd Tuesday. Yes, I will. Yeah, I think it's worth doing in September.
And if it works
And-
out
and-
where whomever who's leading the meeting has to be someplace else, they can come in through Zoom.
Right. So, but I assume we still have the use of your Zoom account indefinitely. Okay.
Yeah.
So
You use
basically,
mine's available also.
so we just basically have to dial in from the place, and if the microphones work as well as Mark's explaining, it should be pretty seamless. So
Yeah.
worth a try for September. Hybrid. And what was the name of the room, Mark?
There's just one
The-
big meeting room in the fire hall there. It's the firehouse up on Church Road. Up on top of the hill there, right at the
Okay.
base of the repeaters.
Okay, there we go. Maybe press the flesh on the repeaters. So, okay, sounds good. So, going once, going twice. Okay, 7-3, all.